Hey everybody, welcome to another Lean in Olympia. I'm Meg Martin, your host, Executive Director for Interfaith Works. And Lean in Olympia is our bi-weekly show where we meet with all kinds of amazing people in our community, talking about issues of social justice, humanity, belief. And I'm really excited about our guest today, Colleen Carmichael, Executive Director of Quixote Villages.
Yes. Hello.
Hi. Thanks
Hi.
so much for being with us.
Most welcome. Glad to be here.
I was telling Colleen right before we started that usually I try to come up with at least some questions, kind of like an outline for our interview. But Colleen and I got to get lunch together a few months ago to really meet each other in person for the first time. And it just felt like kind of an instant connection, kismet, however you say it. And so I was like, you know what? We're just gonna rock and roll today. So, Colleen, will you just start by telling me a little bit about kind of Quixote Village overview?
Sure.
What's going on? What are you up to? Yeah.
Okay, so for those who don't know, Quixote Communities is permanent supportive housing, and we do a tiny home village, which is our model. And it's approximately 30 units of housing with a community building that has offices and full commercial kitchen and meeting rooms and a laundry room and a bathroom.
And each of the tiny homes
they have a toilet, a sink. The ones in Olympia do not have a shower. That was our first village, but the ones we built in Ording have showers in the unit, and same with Shelton.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and so that's the model of care. And then we have just recently started our build in Shelton. So we're doing the Shelton Veterans Village there. And that's going to be a little different because we're putting 4 of the units together to save on cost. Yeah. So they'll still have an individual unit, but they'll just be backed up to each other.
Oh, okay. So they're like little townhomes. Oh, little fourplexes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
So we're going to try it because every village that we build, we try and make adjustments based on what the residents want. Mm-hmm. So the first was putting showers inside the units because so Olympia, came from an encampment. Mm-hmm. So Camp Quixote was an encampment in Olympia, and over the years, it converted into wanting to build a more permanent structure, and then it led to our first village, which is the Quixote Village, which is in Olympia.
Which was such a huge deal for Quixote Communities has just been like so groundbreaking for so long, not only with the encampments and the partnership with the faith communities, which Interfaith Works was lucky enough to be, a part of as well. But it's just always been groundbreaking, those things. And you've been doing tiny homes
too,
for
right?
so long.
I mean, the partnerships was completely different faith-based organizations.
Yeah.
Which, most people assume wouldn't be able to work together, but they did. And they did that for like 7 years when they had to rotate the camp, the whole camp from one church to another.
Yep.
I mean, they really were committed to this project, and thank God, because I think they started this whole ball rolling of trying to be able to get more housing opportunities and showing models that worked and overcoming fears. And it was just a tremendous, and so grateful for the faith-based communities that came together to make it possible, because we wouldn't be here without them. So,
well, and the political advocacy that happened at that time, really paved the way for the emergency ordinance that we have on the books now, both at the city and the county level, that allows for sanctioned encampments. And so it's just, I always try my best to acknowledge and honor the people that have gone before us. Because none of our work would be possible without that. And there's just so many amazing people that really paved a lot of ground with
absolutely. I mean, those are heroic people.
Yeah.
Those are people who know that they're going to get pushback from the society that they're in, but they do it anyways because they know it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that's where the change occurs. That's where we're going to continue to see change occur in society, is people who are brave enough and willing to say, listen, I know this is not popular, but I'm going to do it anyways because it needs to be done. Yeah. And that's, we're just going to keep counting on that as we go forward, because you and I both, as executive directors, have to continue to educate and elevate this thought and discussion about why we should care. Why are people living on the streets worthy of our time and attention? I think that's going to be ongoing, and we will continue to need heroes to help, guide the path forward for us, because we're really in the trenches, you and I, doing the work on a daily basis. And I don't know about you, but I get exhausted, emotionally from this. And it is nice to have people to continue to help pick up that torch and work forward for us. Because at the end of the day, we both need to, have self-care, have some time alone where we can kind of rejuvenate our batteries, because it's really heartbreaking, the work that we do and the people that we deal with. And my want is to see them all be healed. But as you and I both know, with some people, that's just not possible. And they end up going back to the streets. And that, to me, is the hardest part of this job, is having the housing and trying to provide the services and not still being able to get through to that person because of the trauma that they've had, because of what has happened to their lives. They just don't trust us, and they also don't have that feeling of worth within. And that's been the saddest part of the job for me, is having that.
Yeah, and I think that just also speaks to how important it is for our homeless response system to have a variety of different options for people. So
Correct.
Quixote Village, which is, for anybody that doesn't know, it's out by SPSCC it's on Mottman Road.
Yes.
And that was land, I think, that was donated by the county originally. And so all of those pieces, is just all such the building blocks of how we've evolved the homeless service system now. And so now city land gets donated to build housing, which is how Unity Commons got built. The city sold that land at a very nominal price to Lehigh to be able to build the permanent supportive housing. But, some folks who live in our building, for example, might not be as successful living in a tiny home by themselves. It's really been important to them that they moved into that apartment complex with a lot of people they had been in the shelter with. And they feel safer and less isolated in that way. But for other people, that would be kind of a nightmare scenario for them, to be surrounded by that many people that they've been around for years and years. And so having the option of a place like Quixote Village, especially as permanent housing, not a temporary option for a tiny home.
Yeah.
So will you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that the original vision was to have the community room so that there could still be gatherings, but then people would have their original spaces.
Right. And that's still happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's continued to be in our model, so the residents still find value in that. So we will continue to adjust our model, because it's important that we listen to the residents and we trying to continue to make those changes to benefit them. But it's still that way. We have gatherings at the community buildings. We still have our groups that are formed with residents so that they can talk to us about what kind of changes they would like to see in the programs. And in fact, one of the things we've recently done is we're hoping, fingers crossed, to hire a licensed therapist to really work on our mental health support and the programs around that, including trauma programs.
Yep.
And so that came out of conversations with the residents, because we're also seeing that a lot of the survival techniques that they use for the streets are being carried into the housing.
Yep.
And it's challenging being a permanent supportive housing provider when the permanent and housing are being paid for, but the supportive part of it isn't.
Right.
So we're really struggling with the mental health aspect of this. And it's, our case managers are not licensed professionals, and we would like to have some direction from a licensed professional. So we're seeking to do that, but it's been really challenging because most licensed professionals want to go work for hospitals or other care providers, and they're not looking to go to homeless services.
Right.
So once again, I feel like we're groundbreaking in trying to now create a pipeline and work with interns from colleges that are offering master's programs and having them supervised by our licensed professionals so that we can get more licensed therapists who have an understanding of the complexities of homelessness and also can help provide services for our residents and other residents going forward. So that's our new program that we're working on right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just if you want to plug, do you have that job opening current still?
We do.
So
Yeah.
looking for a licensed mental health counselor or
Yes.
social worker
Yes.
that could work towards licensure, or do they need to already be licensed?
They need to be licensed because they're
Okay.
going to be watching and managing the interns.
Okay.
And so for the interns to have hours with us, they need to have a licensed professional.
Got it.
We want to get, our wish is to get a licensed professional. So
Okay.
yeah, and they can contact me directly at Colleen at QuixoteCommunities.org.
Awesome.
Yeah, and to me, it's really interesting because I'm like, this is going to be a totally easy sell because they're not going to have to bill insurances. They can just do the work of getting interns in and managing them. And they don't necessarily have to do therapy on site for the sites. I really want them to manage the program to start with and to make partnerships with like equine,
Yeah.
and also art therapies and music therapies, all that are trauma-based therapies. So that's the goal. So I thought this is going to be an easy sell because they won't have to actually do billing for insurances, which I
Right.
know is a nightmare for them. They literally can just come in and start working. But because it's unknown, because they don't know who we are, then I have to do a sales pitch with them and say, we do have benefits and we have all the things that other organizations have. The only thing we don't have, and it's the same for you and I, the compensation is starting to come up a little bit, but we're not even close to for-profit organizations.
Right.
But I think that the general public is starting to understand that if you want to have this problem solved, you need to have paid professionals who are paid in line with the complexities of this job and of what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
And I think they're starting to understand it more. So I'm hoping that we can get more professionals to come into our line of work because it's so needed.
I hope so too. And I think that there was a shift at the state level. And I don't know if it was during the pandemic or what it was, but we pushed really hard with legislators to understand that homeless response services, homeless programs are essential workers.
Yes.
And we're on the front lines of responding to the pandemic for, in many cases, people who were at the highest risk with the least access to vaccines, with the least access to the educational campaigns. I mean, just the fact, not to rehash the whole pandemic, but I'm like, the fact that the huge tagline throughout was stay safe, stay home. And it's like people who were unsheltered, people who were living in congregant shelters, like for at least the very first year or more, were kind of completely left out of all of the messaging, all of the like protocols for how to stay safe. And so I think that having our state understand that it's really essential work, that it's not just entry-level work that should be, compensated at somebody's first job that they get in high school level. It's really skilled labor. And this is one of the most complex challenges of our society to
Correct.
deal with. And so how do we expect to do that if we have an absolutely malnourished and anemic workforce?
Correct.
So I'm really glad to hear you say that. And I'm all about it too, because it's really important, especially because so many people like me and a lot of people that we work with have come from backgrounds that are, similar or have similar experiences to people who are utilizing our services. And so it's an opportunity for people who've, frankly, really been through some stuff to be able to have a really meaningful, high-skilled career. But right now, there's not a lot of options for how to do that and have a living yourself.
That's right.
So, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
So, Colleen, will you just how many? So there's 3 villages now. So, and Ording is completed.
Ording's completed, yes.
How many units are there?
There's 35 units there.
And those are single units
Correct.
with a community building. And
Correct.
are those all veterans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does placement into ordering work for you all right
Still
now?
through coordinated entry.
Okay, cool.
All of our locations have to go through coordinated entry.
Okay.
So you're taking the highest need, but they also have to be assured that they're a veteran, at least for Ording and Shelton.
Okay.
And the good news too, think Meg, and you'll agree with this, it's like any housing units to start with, we get pushback, right? Because that's just the way that it is. There's a lot of fear around this population and misunderstanding. So veteran population, we don't get as much pushback. So if that's an avenue for us to get into a community, then we can, and we do it, and we show we can successfully run this model. Then it opens up an opportunity for other housing providers and other models. And I think that's what Quixote has been really good at, is that they can get that in there. And specifically for Shelton, when I came on, Shelton had not been completed because there were 2 villages going at the same time, which we learned is not a good way to do this. So I had a year to kind of
Meaning you were building Ording and Shelton at the same time.
or trying to.
Okay. Okay.
So Shelton got delayed. And so when I walked into this job, I was already up against it in Shelton. So I had to start really building the relationships with the people of Shelton, with the city of Shelton, and Mason County for that point, and just say, look, we didn't have the bandwidth. Now we have the bandwidth. And so I'm here and I'm going to be updating you. And I met with the leaders of the Shelton community and said, hey, we have to stop talking and we have to start doing. Because you don't trust the words, and I get that. And it's up to me to show you that you can trust Quixote, that we are an excellent organization, and we're going to make this happen. And we did. So I sent out, and still to this day, I'm sending out monthly emails to key players and legislators to let them know where we are in construction. So we're being very transparent about this. I think it's important that we do that. And I also speak at the Shelton City Council meetings because I want the public to hear from us, kind of overcoming some of the myths and misinformation as it relates to homeless people. So that's kind of what our role has been. And it's worked really well. I think for future villages, we're really going to get immersed into the community for the first year. So they know us and they understand who we are and they can trust us and build that relationship. And then it's easier to build that way. You still have some naysayers, but I think they're getting less and less because they can see that we're not trying to hide anything and we're trying to share as much as we can. And that's important, I think, so people don't feel so afraid.
Yeah. Can you say just a little more about what have those conversations in Mason County been like? I mean, you're no stranger to community pushback or to, some of the challenging discourse that comes up around homelessness. So what's like the Mason County flavor been like with all of that?
I think they're getting better. I think it's just education. I've at the city council meetings, I've been challenged by members of the public who are trying to express their obvious frustration with this population and their thoughts about this population. And it's really important to me that I bring facts, that I bring statistical information that can be verified to say, that's not really true, that's not what happens. And thankfully, because of our history, we did start as an encampment. So I can say it is possible to turn an encampment that you see on the city streets that you are very distrustful of and you don't like and turn it into something like we have.
Yeah.
That happened. So I know that happened. So that helps. But there's always, and I know you feel this too, I've been told that I'm an enabler or that I just don't understand. I'm trying to push my agenda for whatever reason. And I'm like, I have to just keep combating that with, well, no, honestly, those of us who work in this line of work have a choice of where we can work. And we choose to work in this line because we want to see change.
Yeah.
We are doers. We don't want to just talk about what needs to happen in society. We actually want to do something about it.
Right.
And to me, that's just my calling. That's where I feel I'm meant to be. I know that you feel the same way too. Yeah. So it's just, and not shaming people, because shaming does not help. If I try and go into a community and say, how dare you? How do you not have a heart?
Yeah.
It's not about that. I think nobody wants to see others be hurt. I really, truly believe that. And I think you're finding, and I find, when we invite people to help us, whether that be volunteering, whether that be participating in painting units when someone leaves, just them hanging out with some of our residents, it shifts them every time. So you and I just have to continue to do a good job of making sure that our residents' stories are heard without our residents feeling like they are the poster children for what can happen.
Right.
It's a tough line to walk, but I know we have to educate the public in order for us to continue to do the works that we do and to continue to expand this. So
yeah, totally. I resonate so much with what you're saying. And I think sometimes like that's where for folks who are in this field, some of that self-care comes in, because it can feel discouraging to be like, I wish I didn't have to work so hard to get people to understand why there should be no one outside today.
Yeah.
In the snow this morning.
Yeah. And you and I are walking in this thinking probably the same thought that other people don't, which is like, why is this happening? Mm-hmm. Why are we allowing this? Mm-hmm. And I know, and you know the reasons, but it does not negate the fact that tonight, when you and I are home in our cozy, warm homes, there are people on the streets. Mm-hmm. And I don't even like being out in this weather for the, 10 minutes it took me to walk to here. And it's just like, it's not right.
Yeah.
And we know it's not right. So I wish you and I could fix it instantly. I see that the way that justice works is it's not a quick fix. You've got to be so committed to this and passionate about it, because it's wearing on the soul.
Yeah.
And I know that it's wearing on the soul. And so that's why I think it's great that you and I continue to educate the public about this. But it also someone will hear this today and think, I want to do more.
Yeah.
And want to help in whatever way feels comfortable to them. Like, I don't try and pigeonhole people into, you must do this. It's like, what do you like to do? What are you passionate about? Like, some people like to knit. I'm like, okay, well then knit beanies.
Yeah.
And we'll give them to the residents. Or I know there was a quilting group and they made a bunch of quilts.
Yep.
So those kinds of things are great because it gives someone a doorway, a way in. And that's a start. I don't want to expect that people are going to pick up a banner and run with it for us. I understand that's true, but I think the more we educate and the more people feel comfortable to just start somewhere, then they really become advocates. It's really interesting because the people I've talked to, and I'm sure you find this too, we start with a conversation, they start listening, they start learning, maybe they come to our sites and meet some of the people, and then within the year, they are then becoming advocates.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people have to see it. Because if I could talk about it all day long, but people sometimes who are against this, or not against it, but just don't understand it, they feel like, oh, well, you're self-motivated. You have a job out of this. I'm like, I don't know any homeless provider who's not like, I would love to go back to my for-profit job.
Yeah.
There's no one I know who's like, this is the best. It is really heartbreaking work.
Yeah.
But I can't go to sleep at night knowing that there's still people out there. And I get really sad about the fact that we are trying so hard to fight against not just the mental health conditions that are existing and prevalent in this community, but the perceptions of the public and the people who say they want to help, but they don't actually want to help, or people that publicly tell us they want to support us, but behind the scenes they're doing things to delay or derail.
Yeah.
It's just... And it's, when you were speaking about the pandemic, I was struck by the fact that everyone is touting all the heroes in the community. But not once did I hear, let's also support the homeless providers who are going out there and providing meals and protection for those that don't have any.
Yeah.
Why? Why are we not considered heroes? And I don't mean we as in you and I directly, but the people who are providing the services.
Yeah.
There's something in our society that says, well, they're choosing that life, so therefore they don't deserve any support from us, or the people providing support, the enablers, as I like to call them. They don't deserve any kind of praise from us. And I'm like, why not?
Well, and there's so many, and I think that it is that thing of like, in order to sleep at night knowing that while we're all in our homes under blankets in beds, that there are people that are on literal sidewalks in the freezing cold, right? I think like in order to sleep at night, in order to there has to be some kind of justification, in order to look away.
Yeah.
And that I think is normal human
Yeah.
behavior. But then that's where we start to hear like, well, they're not from here. They're
Yes.
not ours, right?
Or
They're
that
not
you and
from
I are
here.
busing them in on our magical buses that we have hidden somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sending them to Shelton's sending them to
Yeah.
Olympia, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, so they're not from here, or they're criminals, or they're drug addicts, or they're choosing
Pedophiles.
this life, or they're pedophiles, or they're, whatever the
Lazy.
Yep, lazy. There's this like, if you can create the mental gymnastics to justify why it's okay that somebody's out there. And so then that just creates this whole environment that then, the people who work in it can be villainized often. I have gotten laughed at before when I've said that there's nothing more that I would want than to work myself out of a job.
Yes.
That's literally what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
And I think that gets lost often because, again, there has to be this sort of narrative created or justification as to why programs are going to make neighborhoods worse or less safe or, whatever those things are. And I think that it just, more and more, the longer I do this, I kind of always go back to that place of like, I guess maybe I don't need to convince you
Yes.
that humans are worth it. I like at the end of the day, we actually both want the same exact thing. Whether I'm coming from a place of love and care and compassion, and you're coming from a place of anger and frustration and fear and whatever it is, we actually both want the exact same thing,
right,
which is for people to be off the streets.
Correct.
And I think when the enabling thing comes up, I spent so many years, Colleen, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, like so many years being like, no, we're not enabling people. No, 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 no. And anymore, I'm like, heck yeah, we're enabling people. We're enabling them to get out of doorways downtown.
Yeah.
We're enabling them to
have a future.
Connect to treatment.
Yeah.
We're enabling them to pay their own rent,
Yes.
30% of their income to rent. That's
Yes.
what happens at Quixote Villages. That's
Correct.
what happens at Unity Commons. We're enabling them to have opportunities to increase their incomes.
Yeah.
We're enabling them to get health care. And it's just like, that's actually what's happening. That's the reality. That's the facts.
Yes.
And I think that in many ways, our communities have come to understand that better. But I have noticed a backslide post kind of as the pandemic wears on a bit. But I just think that it is really important to keep having these conversations.
Yeah.
Even though it's all encompassing for us.
Yeah, and I think, if people care to know, so I will say to the general public, when you see homeless people or you have a reaction about it, rather than just sitting with that reaction, I'm asking them to educate themselves. So the National Alliance to End Homelessness is a great source of data. They have national data about homelessness. And when I go to meetings and I tell people that are pushing back on it, it costs about $35,000 a year for someone to stay on the streets.
Yep.
Versus housing them is $12,000 a year. So if you don't like them for whatever your reasons, there is an economic benefit to housing people.
Yeah.
So I really do try and when you start adding that up by the numbers of people that are on the streets, that number really starts to shock people. And they're like, wait, what? And it's like, take $35,000 and multiply by the number of people we have at our last homeless count.
Right.
And then you're going to see the numbers we're talking about. So I'm saying you're already spending that money in the communities. You're already spending it. But I think what happens is because I don't actually write a check out of my checkbook, I can't feel that cost.
Yeah.
So that is what's hard, is that people hear it, but they don't feel it personally. So it's like, okay, well, fine. It's not fine when they hear it, but they just don't, feel it. So that's the disconnect I get from people sometimes. But I also encourage people to understand trauma. Trauma in the brain, I really started researching that a couple of years ago because I was so frustrated by what was going on with our population that we were serving, and also by just in general, what happens with the brain with trauma, and learning that the wiring of the brain is forever changed when that trauma occurs, when you're anywhere from during brain development, which is 0 to 25. So anytime something dramatic occurs during that time, your brain gets wired around that event. And unless you have a really stable, secure home life where the people that are around you can give you the support and love that you need, it forever changes the way you see society and the way you react and engage in society. And so I think if more people understood that and really saw the science of trauma and the brain, it would be fantastic for us, because then people would be a lot more empathetic. And I also feel like I wish their bodies that the residents were in were still the child. Because I think if people saw all these children out on the streets, which is essentially what they are, they would have a lot more empathy for them than as an adult body with a child inside. Because you and I have seen and felt the child. We've seen the damaged, hurt child that is staring at us, and we are heartbroken by it. But I think most people in the community only see this adult, and they may see the adult screaming on the street corner, and they're fearful of that person. But I'm saying, think about the number of people you actually see doing that versus the total population. It's a very small number of people who are having those episodes. But also understand that if you're that disengaged, that you're having episodes out on the street corner, you really do need our help, because how do you think they're managing their lives? If they can't even pull it together, so to speak, just to be hanging out on a street corner. So I think it's not that people are angry at the people that are causing these issues, although in some cases they are because of the defecation and things like that. But I think if they had a better understanding of what was going on with them and what are the challenges they face, they might feel a little bit better about it. And I keep saying, hey, if you do not want the defecation on your streets, there is a way out. It's called supporting people that are doing the work. So either provide donations to those of us who are actually doing the work, or to the churches or the faith-based communities that are helping support people that, those are the ways that you can really make a change if you don't like it. But just showing up at meetings and talking about how angry you are doesn't change anything. It never has. Action is what changes it. Funding is what changes it. And those are things that you can actually do to make a difference and will help us. And it's not easy work. So if you don't understand it, the least I ask you to say is please donate and help support those of us who are doing the work, because we're not asking you to do it. You don't actually have to go out and engage with homeless people and help them. We're doing that for you. So help us in whatever way you can, in whatever way feels good. And I've had little kids do lemonade stands and bring funds to us. I mean, it's just amazing how whenever I speak to kindergartners and first graders and people are like, you speak to these? And I said, yes. They never ask me why. They only say, what can we do? Or, yes, I've seen that. And I think my mom and I can do this. So it's not the young children that are afraid of this population. It's the adults. And maybe they see some of themselves in this population, and that's what scares them. Or they know a family member who's out on the streets and they feel bad that they know that that family member's out there and they haven't done anything to assist. Well, we'll help us. And we're making really such strides with people who have never had a connection to a community or a family, and now they are getting that through our services. So that's huge.
And I think that the understanding of how trauma impacts people is so important, because once you understand that, the person yelling on the street corner is actually behaving exactly as they should.
Exactly, because
it is very appropriate.
Yeah.
What is happening for that person in that moment is not actually unpredictable at all.
No.
It's extremely predictable. It's extremely appropriate for what is happening in terms of the trauma that they've experienced and the impacts that that's had over time. But I think that it's so off-putting for people who don't know what they're looking at, that it can feel, it just, I think that, and the other point that I want to say that I was thinking of when you were talking was that feeling the cost of it and how difficult that is. And I think that when people, it's the causes of mass homelessness in some ways are very simple and in other ways are very complex in the United States. And those complex societal issues, major shifts that we would have to see in the way that we do things, the way we operate as a society in this country, in order to actually see an end to homelessness as we know it today, are so extreme and so almost philosophical in so many ways that it's difficult, I think, for people to feel that shift that's needed. But they have to walk over someone in a sleeping bag on the sidewalk to get to wherever they're going.
Yes.
And that's a much more tangible thing, person, item to be able to place blame, place anger, place responsibility on than the responsibility that we as a society, I believe strongly, bear to assist that person who is in the sleeping bag. And I think that is where it'll just take time maybe, or I don't know exactly what, but it's
education. I think the more we educate people, the less fear there is. And I know you and I know that. And the more advocates we have who are educating, it does us no good to go in and shame people.
Yeah.
Either side of the equation. I mean, I've had people on both extremes, and I'm sure you have too. Those that are saying you're enablers, and then on the other side, and you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's like, hey, you and I have a vision about what we think we can do to make a change, and we're doing that. But I think neither of us would sit here and go, we've got it down. I mean, we're both dealing with crises at our villages or our sites and going, okay, there might be some of our residents who would not agree that I'm the best person in the world.
Yeah.
But, it's that area of mental health that we're not doing well. And I'm the first to admit it. It's like we still have changes we have to make to these programs and these models to make them better. But the shifts in society and culture, those are going to come at some point. I don't know when. I mean, it's a huge task in front of us.
Yeah.
But it's with any justice, it's with any, civil justice issues, social justice issues, you have to keep going. And future new generations are going to come on and they're going to pick up, it just is ongoing. But I think the more you and I can spend educating and doing programs like this and talking about what we experience and how different it is when you're actually with people that are struggling. Like when you and I see people on the street screaming, I don't get freaked out. I just like, there's a person who's in need of help and attention. It doesn't scare me. I'm really a lot less fearful of life because of working with the population that we've worked with.
Yeah, same.
Because I have such insight to the human condition now. And I really want to continue to see us grow this. I think it would be fantastic if we had more people of color coming into our industry and being part of the process and working on this, because a lot of it is generational discrimination and poverty and issues that I, as a white person with the privilege that I've experienced, don't have that firsthand knowledge of, you know? And I think that's important too. The more people we can get to the table, but it feels like, people aren't getting that message and aren't applying for the jobs at the levels that we would want them to. So it's just, there's a lot that we have to do in not only just doing our jobs, but really spreading the word about what is happening and what we can do to make changes. And little things are important. I mean, just educating yourself, I think, is the most critical component. We both would agree that I would love to take the time to educate everybody, but if you're really curious and you're fearful or you have issues that you think, oh, I don't like this, well, find out why. Do some research. It's literally going to the National Alliance to End Homelessness. That's like, I love going there for statistical information because it's great. But in every instance, like when people say, my housing prices are going to drop, that is not true. It's actually statistically been proven that the opposite is true. You can actually gain value because we are improving what was once an inhabitable spot.
Yeah.
So that happens when people say, well, they don't want the care. Well, if you walked up to me on a street and I didn't know who you were and you offered me housing and services, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to say no.
Yeah.
And I'm not, I hope, in a state of mental fragility. But for those of us we serve, they don't understand that. And so I'm not going to say yes to services.
Right.
And for some, it does take an overcoming, and it takes a lot of work, and it takes outreach workers that are really skilled in overcoming objections and working through. But that's okay. That's a small percentage of the population that we deal with. So whenever someone brings up those, ones off, you and I are both like, yeah, that does exist, but it's such a small percentage of the total population that we serve.
Right.
And then there's some that just need rapid rehousing funds, that just need something to stabilize them for a period of time.
Yeah.
To get them back from an episode of a really high medical expense or an unexpected loss in a job. I mean, those people just need a little to get them by. And once they get by that point, they're fine. So there's a lot of different ways. If you don't want to help the direct on the street, you can also do rapid rehousing and help people stay housed. Or you can do food. I mean, there's a lot of food insecurities, but I really want people to learn that while it's lovely to do that, I think it's also important that you find housing in conjunction with that.
Yeah.
Both are equally important.
Yeah.
Because giving people food is not necessarily the way to teach them how they're going to be able to sustain themselves going forward. And I'm all about them sustain themselves and grow and understand that they have the value within to have the life that they always envisioned for themselves.
Yeah.
That to me is what we're about. It's not about, oh, if I give you my house, this house, I can stand in glory on my, I'm so fantastic that I gave you this house. It's like, what the hell? That's nothing.
Yeah.
The house is just the beginning.
Yeah.
That's to hopefully stabilize the fight or flight that their brains have been set in for so long. But you and I both know, even with a house, we've had people go back to the streets.
Right.
And I mean, it's just heartbreaking. You're trying your best to help, but they're also causing more trauma to other residents. So you're like, okay, what do we have to change in this model so this doesn't keep going like this?
Yeah.
And our staff doesn't look to me like, I don't know what to do right now. I'm like, you know what? I don't know what to do either because I'm not a mental health provider.
Yeah.
So it's really, not being afraid to admit when you've
as a
done
mental health
things wrong.
provider, I can tell you, I also don't know what to do sometimes. So
I mean, right?
it's a complex
It's
thing.
really, we're dealing with the highest acuity
Yeah.
because that's how coordinated entry works for those that don't understand. We have a master list that we get from counties, and they are rated essentially on their need. And the highest needs are the first people to get housed.
Yeah.
So those are people with really severe and persistent mental health and addiction issues.
Yeah.
And so we're not, yes, I understand a lot about mental health. I've studied a lot about mental health, but I haven't actually been a practitioner,
Yeah.
that is licensed in that way. Although I feel like sometimes I am. But it's really good to continue to work on what we need to programmatically to support the needs of the residents and have them feel like they're being heard and giving them a variety of choices. Again, same as housing. Like, I don't want to just say, all you can do is talk therapy. That's all I'm going to provide to you. It's not enough. Some people don't want that. Some people want to, draw or music. A lot of people do music. And, we're in an environment where music is able to be recorded and expressed because artists like to, that's their way out. Instead of having those difficult conversations, they can express it through their art.
Yeah.
So it's the same with our residents. It's like one size doesn't fit all. We have to be really creative in the ways that we can help them overcome these challenges.
Yeah.
And a lot of the therapies and things that we've had in the past aren't effective at treating trauma. So we have to really start opening up the pathways and not just do trauma-informed care. I know that's a big buzzword. I mean, yes, it does not take a rocket scientist to see that people are really high in their ACE scores and they have trauma.
Right.
What are you going to do about it? So that's where we,
how do you actually shift the way that you
and how do we
talk to
shift the
people,
mental health
approach-
discussion
yeah.
about this? Like, you've got to start understanding trauma, and you've got to start understanding how to treat trauma, not just identify it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying to the mental health providers. If you have not read Bessel van der Kolk's book about The Body Keeps the Score, and also start learning about trauma and the many ways to treat trauma, it needs to happen because we really need to encourage that so that our providers can understand trauma better and how to support it instead of just doing one-on-one conversations, because people that are really mentally fragile don't want to have conversations about it. They're afraid, because even people that I know that are friends that are reluctant to go for counseling, they're like, I don't want to relive it again.
Yeah.
I'm like, you haven't been for therapy in a while, huh? Because it's like, they don't want you to relive it either. I mean, there's so many things like EMDR and other therapies where they can ground you to the moment.
Yeah.
You know, you stay grounded to here, and you may visit that, but you're firmly planted in today. You're just kind of doing it in a really safe environment, which is different than it's been in the past. So I'm really encouraged and hopeful about what I see about that.
Yeah.
I'm really grateful for people like you and others who are doing the work, because I've told you this in meetings before, you're a hero to me. You really are, because you're living this. You're not just sitting back and going, well, it makes me sad when I see someone on the street. You're like, no, my life is going to be committed to doing this work for as long as I can do it,
Yeah.
with still feeling good with my own mental health. And we have to check in a lot with ourselves, because it's really brutal work.
Yeah.
But I'm just so grateful to you, Meg, for all that you do and continue to do, in this program especially, to help shed a light on what is going on in the public, what is happening out there, and how can we as normal citizens help?
Yeah.
Because we've all had situations in our life. I know I have, and you have too. I've had to overcome such horrific adversities in my life that I just feel like I don't want anyone to have to go through this feeling of I'm invisible and I don't matter. I don't want others to feel this. That's why I'm doing the work that I do, because I know what it feels like to be ignored. I know what it feels like to be shamed and to be basically ostracized from my family, because they don't understand how a person overcomes these challenges. They want to be careful, and they don't want to be exposed to this. And it's like, everybody has this in their lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm so empathetic to the cause, and I think you are too.
Yeah.
Because we've experienced a lot of the stuff that we're trying to help people overcome. And it's like, even if you haven't had those experiences, you've been fortunate not to, please just help support us, because we are doing really such incredible work, I think, to help save lives in the community. And for those that don't want us to save lives, for whatever their reasons are, because of the fear that they have, being fiscally responsible with the monies that is entrusted to us.
Yeah.
So there's many ways that you can help, but just help us. If nothing else, just say thank you to someone who does this kind of work, because it's really hard. It really is hard and heartbreaking. And I think just hearing someone say thank you, Meg.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing the work you do, and for being that voice, because we need it so desperately right now. There's so many people that are in need of this. And if it wasn't for you, Meg, I just think about the lives that you've saved over time, and know that. And the families who can't come to you personally and say, thank you, Meg, for standing up for my brother, my sister, anyone in the family, that you've done. And what the ripple effect of that has been on so many other lives, not just the people you serve, Meg, but everyone else who's around them. You've done that for our community. And I just want to say thank you to you for what you continue to do.
Well, I mean, Colleen, thank you. That's a lot. I'm trying to just hear that. And it's a lot. And I think, I do think that it's true that there's been a huge impact from our work, and it's not, I am one of,
right.
At this point at Interfaith Works, we've got 70 amazing employees who are at the shelter right now, with folks who've been testing people during a COVID outbreak that we recently had, who've been, just are going time after time, day after day after day to choose this work again. And I see you as one of those people. And I have just been so refreshed whenever we've been able to talk about, you've helped me kind of remember the flame, inside, and to have that fire be burning, because I think that that's what happens when you do this work over a long period of time, is that you either tend to go to a place of kind of more anger or more hopelessness that things aren't going to change, or your flame kind of gets dwindled, And I think that it's I'm really inspired by you and by the energy that you're bringing to our community through Quixote Communities. And so I really humbly accept that
I'm glad.
compliment. That is like such an honor to hear from you. And I give it all right back to you as well and
And
to your team.
I mean, I have one of the best teams. I know we could probably argue about who has the best team, but really all of the team, we have 9 people now working. And I'm really wanting to collaborate with them and have them involved in this because I don't have all the answers. And I am so blessed, honestly. I mean, every single one of them adds something to me. And like we have this little chat we do where we talk to each other every day and just, jokes and other stuff. But I just feel like, to your point, people that are in this line of work really, really are giving so much of themselves to this work.
Yeah.
I mean, they're risking their own wealth essentially to be in this line of work because they could go anywhere else that's for profit and make a lot more money. But they're choosing to be in this line of work because they want to make a difference.
Yeah.
They understand the importance of what we're doing. And at the end of the day, they want to be able to look in the mirror and say, did I do what I could to make a difference in the world that I was living in? And the answer to that is yes.
Yeah.
And I know it's dangerous in this line of work because you get to the point of no return, as I call it, where you're so burnt out, not just by trying to help the people that we help, but the community members that push back on you and all the things that we have to deal with, that you get to the point where that light gets out. Mm-hmm. And so that's, in some ways how the public can help is just thanking and saying, we really appreciate that you're doing this. Just those little things. I don't think people realize. Yeah, because we don't often hear that. When I walk into a community meeting, I'm not hearing, oh God, you're here. Thank you so much. We're so happy to see you. What I hear instead is, I'm tired of someone defecating on my front step of my business.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, hi, I don't think we met. My name is Colleen. It's like, it's just one of those things where you immediately, they start into this. Or if they see anyone who's homeless on the streets, they contact me to say, oh, I saw so-and-so on the streets. I'm like, and what did you think that you wanted to do to solve that?
Right.
Because I think if you work in this line too, and you're in leadership role, people want us to, every time something homeless comes up, we should have an answer. And I want to be really clear with the public. You and I are doing the best that we can. I do know that we can end homelessness. There's no question. I know we could. It is because I've seen when we've had the pandemic, and I've also seen when I was from California, we saw the wildfires. We had the wildfire in Santa Rosa, and I think there was about 5,000 people that were unhoused because of the fires. It took a week, and every single one of those people were housed.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I know for certain people did not do mental health checks. They didn't do background checks.
Yeah.
They didn't do drug testing.
Yeah.
They didn't do any of that stuff.
Yeah.
They just brought people in. Why? Because they felt bad for them. Yeah. Because something out of their control happened and they wanted to help.
And they allocated the necessary resources that
they
actually
didn't even
matched
think about it. They just did it. And it's the same with any other national disaster. Pandemic is... When all of the nations came together and said, pandemic is an issue, we need to work on this, things happen immediately. Yeah. I mean, fairly immediately considering how these things go. But with homelessness and this crisis, the only thing that is stopping us from solving it is people's mental feeling about this program and this problem. That's it. That's the only thing that's stopping us from solving this. It's society's views on what homelessness is and what caused it. If we could shift that, it would be ended tomorrow. And I know that. And you know that. That is what we struggle against. It's not the people living in the streets.
Yeah.
It's the people who are housed, who don't want those people living near them, who don't want to see those people. That's the struggle that we face.
Yeah.
And just saying to the people who feel that way, find out what the facts are. And if you don't believe those of us who are providing these services, come to our sites. We want you to come and see the people and talk to them. Mm-hmm. And hear for yourself what has happened as a result of this shift that they feel that they've had.
Yeah.
Some it lasts and some it doesn't because it's a longer period of time that they need to get themselves back to stable. And it's really hard to deal with residents that are in crisis. And it takes a lot of my time and it takes a lot of your time and our management time, but and then they end up going back to the streets. But those are such small numbers compared to the number of people we have actually assisted and gotten stabilized and gotten where they need to go. And I think we just keep doing this, Meg, because I'm your support, you're mine. When we get to those moments where and I know we've had them both, where we go home, we go, what the actual is happening right now? Or I sit at a community meeting and someone says something really hurtful, and I'm like, you do realize I'm an actual human being, and I'm going to feel that, not just hear it.
Right.
Like, we're not numbing the pain, you and I. We're actually feeling all this.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to understand we all have had in our lives something that had caused us to want to numb it. There's a lot of people with addiction issues, and a lot of them are housed. So
vast majority are housed.
Just, understand this is a very prevalent issue within our community. It's not just for people unhoused. It's just that they're more visible to you because you see them.
Right.
So it's just, I think it's education, it's understanding, it's trying to get to the economics of it, all these different ways and facets we have to get people involved.
Yeah.
We can do it. I'm just saying to the people on the streets, if you haven't thanked your homeless service provider in a while, thank them. Send them a card or send them a text or send them an email and just say, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. It means a lot to me. Because if you may not agree with the people that we serve on the streets, that's fine. But I don't think you disagree with the people who are trying to help.
Yeah.
Really trying to make a change in society.
Yeah.
And just like any other social justice heroes in the past, they saw an issue that existed in the community. They knew it wasn't right, and they did something to change it. That is anyone. I mean, I did not sit out when I was a young child and say, I'm going to be a homeless service provider when I get older. I never thought about this. But I saw a problem in the community, and it was like a jigsaw puzzle. I thought, why is this happening? I was very curious about it, and that's what got me on this path. So I think anyone could, look at the two of us.
Yeah.
We're prime examples of what one person can do. We just have not stopped doing this for the last, for me, it's been like 10 years now.
Yeah.
I'm sure longer for you. So, but it's evidence to show you that one person can make a change and difference. And if we all had that about whatever you feel passionately about that is wrong right now, do something about it.
Yeah.
Even small gestures help make a huge change. And that's, if you don't want to do anything other than say thank you or please keep doing the work you're doing, that in itself will help us going. So.
Well, that I think is a lovely message to wrap up our time together. Is there anything else that any kind of like burning desire that you would want the community to know or take with them today about the work you're doing at Quixote?
I think the most important thing that everyone should understand about the work both of us are doing is love is what is needed to change this. Yeah. It always has been the answer. And if that's love for self first, and then the capacity to love others, that is the thing that we all need to address. Is if you're not wanting to help others, then I say seek inside what you are looking for, which is love.
Yeah.
And there are many ways to help, but I think if we learn that lesson about helping others and not judging, because it's never about them, it's always about you. It's always about what you do and what your response is to what's going on, never about the other. If you stay in that lane and you work on self always, you will find a way to help and support those of us who are doing this work or any of the social justice work that's going on in the community. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. You're just such an incredible person. I knew when we first met, we connected because we're soul sisters, because we're both wanting to make this change. And I will say it again, I just am so grateful for you and what you've done, Meg, and the work you continue to do, and for the families and the residents and the community that you serve. I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. Thank you too. Again, none of the work that I've done would be possible without those that have gone before me. And I think that Quixote Village and Camp Quixote and all of that is like every day we build on what was started there. So I love that we were able to have this time together.
Me too.
I guess if anybody is in Shelton or Mason County, probably showing up to some city council meetings would be helpful. Introduce yourself to Colleen and make connections there. Quixote Communities is the only permanent supportive housing that's being built in Shelton right now
Yeah,
in Mason,
in Mason
County.
County.
So it's really important to support that work. What can you say how people can find out more?
Yeah, they can go to our website, QuixoteCommunities.org. We also have Facebook pages for our organization, which is Quixote Communities, but you can also go to each village. So you could do Shelton Veterans Village, Orting Veterans Village, or Quixote Village, and specifically find out about the one that is in your area. But
And
Quixote
it's
Communities.
Quixote.
Correct.
Yep. Okay. Thank you so much. You're a joy to
You're a
spend
joy.
an hour with.
Oh, you too.
All right. Make sure to catch up on past episodes on our YouTube channel, Interfaith Works Thurston County, on our website, interfaith-works.org. We are on Instagram at IW Homeless Services. And yeah, it's great to be with you all. Corey will be back in a couple weeks with his episode, and we will see you again. Bye.
Bye.